came down here and tried to talk to you all night, didn't they? Hey, your people just ran down here.
Are they our people?
Hey, look.
Come to Little Rock, Arkansas to see my friend Bert Taggart and the show celebrating the 5th anniversary of his record label, Max Recordings. Max is a label of all Little Rock and Arkansas rock bands.
Oh yeah, I'm making progress now.
A label dedicated to Arkansas bands may sound like a ridiculous venture, but Bert and I came out of a unique music scene. That's me, the weak link in a handful of good bands. I gave up pretty quick and moved on to a different calling. But at 16, I found a way to contribute to a really exciting scene.
Growing up here, nothing was ever gonna come to us, so we were always in the position of having to make our own entertainment, and it's sink or swim. You either go nuts or just get together with like-minded people and start making really amazing stuff that doesn't sound like anything else or look like anything else that's out there because you have no frame of reference.
I have this theory about Little Rock and the music scene. There are too many good bands for the amount of people that actually live in this town. That the ratio is just all out of whack.
Then, Little Rock was the best. Today, Little Rock is still the best. For its size and for the amount of people here and for the things that everybody does, and the level of talent and the lack of attention on a national scale.
Once this music scene started kicking up, it became very obvious that we had better rockers than Memphis. We had a better scene than Memphis, better than Dallas, better than Houston, St. Louis. I mean, all these towns around us.
Little Rock music is far better than almost anywhere else I've been.
We have our own thing going on here that's different than any place I've ever been in the world.
I've been everywhere and I've never found a scene that gets along, that produces such incredible art than Little Rock, Arkansas.
There's an unbelievable amount of pride, and it comes from having that little idea of maybe guys in Dallas or guys in Memphis wouldn't give you the credit because you're from Little Rock, Arkansas, you know what I mean? Arkansas as a whole is a tiny state right by Texas, and Louisiana and Memphis, Mississippi and Alabama, you know, and you're the smallest thing around. So you gotta kind of stick your chest out and be proud of what you have, and we have an unbelievable music scene.
What does anybody expect out of Little Rock, Arkansas, the music scene? What would you expect? If you were born and raised in Connecticut, and you heard that there was an incredible music scene in Little Rock, Arkansas, what would you think that scene would be like? If you wouldn't know.
A scene means different things to different people. To me, a scene is a group of people collectivized around a particular art form at a certain place at a certain point in time. It's a community. Today in Little Rock, there's a vibrant hip-hop scene, a North Little Rock metal scene that calls themselves the Shit Dogs, and a bunch of amazing young rock bands. But this movie isn't about them. This movie is about a group of kids in a small southern town brought together by punk rock in the late 1980s. It's about the scene they established and what grew out of it. The scene affected the lives of everyone involved. This isn't an experience necessarily unique to Little Rock, but it's a powerful experience, and I wanted to see how it happens.
We can't disappoint anybody. We don't have any reputation to spoil. So why not just go? Why not just do it? We're out here in the middle of nowhere. We only got each other to play to. So why not play what we want to play?
Tonight, Assistant News Director Mel Hanks begins a three-part series, How to Be a Rock Star, that introduces us to some local talent that someday may be in Billboard's Top 40.
But first, a little background.
The only
two things that people consistently tell me about Little Rock when I meet them. They're like, oh, Bill Clinton's from there, and they saw Bangin' in Little Rock. Bangin' in Little Rock is a HBO documentary from 92 or 93 about the Crips and Bloods situation in Little Rock. I think my parents' house is in it for like a second, but
Because they were Crips.
yeah, but that's really what everybody across the country knows. I don't know how that happened.
Arkansas is a poor southern state of 2 million people. It's Mississippi Delta in the east and mountains in the west. Little Rock lies in almost the exact middle of the state.
I mean, I had the same notions about Arkansas that I think anybody who hasn't lived in Arkansas probably has. I thought it was a place where people would, point at airplanes, look at that.
Over the years, Arkansas has struggled to change its image. It's been the Bear State, the land of opportunity, the natural state. But whenever they slapped on a new name, something would come along and ruin their PR efforts.
Arkansas has got two things. You can fade away into the woodwork here, get married, get you a duck hat and a Dodge truck, and, get you a trailer. And be simple, and it's easy to live here. Or you can really concentrate on something and work on something because there's nothing else to do.
You don't have to have a big-time recording studio and be over 30 to make music. You can do it after school, homegrown.
Let's jam.
They used to teach school kids in Arkansas was that this was one of the few states that if you built a wall around it, it could be self-sufficient. And I think that's one of the reasons that people don't know about Little Rock. I think that, and people don't know about Arkansas, because Arkansas is it's like Israel, It's sort of surrounded by this other that it doesn't quite trust, and yet it's looking out there for approbation all the time.
Why can't Arkansas join in this mainstream?
It's a funny place because we're not quite Southern, and we're not quite Midwestern, and we're not quite Texas, and we don't really know where we fit in the world, in the greater country. So we do tend to both to look inward, and I think we tend to think that anyone from here can't be quite ready for prime time.
Glenn Campbell, Johnny Cash, Black Oak, Arkansas. Success is possible in the music world from the land of opportunity, but do these people make it because or in spite of their home state?
Of course, that depends on your definition of success.
What are your goals? Are you going to be a professional singer?
No, I'm a plumber.
Our story begins around 1986.
To have a good punk scene, you have to have kind of an oppressive environment to breed anger and malcontent and rebelliousness among youth, right?
Yeah.
And Little Rock has those things. You've got, a small to mid-sized city that's got all the problems of a big city. There's a lot of people that are pretty narrow-minded, openly, racist or just conservative. That'll, if you, at least back then, you walk down the street looking different. If you got funny haircut and like a punk t-shirt on, you're gonna have rednecks go faggot. It's just like right. It's just like you got a lot of the negative things that make people want to play, that make people angry and want to play punk music and want to let out their frustration at the world.
I ended up going to England to visit James, and the Christmas of '81, it was really mind-blowing because I went there in my North Face down vest and my collared shirts, going to my Catholic high school for boys and my braces, and I was just ready to have my mind blown. So I go there to visit James, and James is hanging out with Teds and punks. They had a lifestyle and a kind of costume that accompanied their passion for their music. So it was this youth cult music that I was heretofore never exposed to, and I had to wrap my mind around the fact that, wow, you can be into music and just wear the uniform that accompanies it and just live your life according to your music. It's the soundtrack for your life.
And Dead Kennedys, Nuts, Punks Fuck Off was one of the first singles I got, and that was amazing to me. Like, fuck off. The word fuck being in the title of a song, I was just like, you can do that? Like, we couldn't even believe you could do that. There was nothing like that you could buy in a store in Little Rock.
And it was just this really, like, secret society when you'd eventually meet somebody that knew about punk rock. And it was really thrilling because you felt like you knew something that no one else growing up in Arkansas knew about.
I don't think we ever got picked on by like, those guys listen to punk. Like people barely even knew what it was to make fun of it.
I wore a combination of hooded sweatshirts and leather jackets and bondage pants or something. Because in Little Rock, you don't ever quite get it right because you're just compiling all your information about punk from all these different magazines that you've gotten from somewhere.
I was always a big pussy about my hair. I think I had a Jewish faux hawk, which was very hard to maintain. That Bobby had a mohawk, which when he got a full, real, spiked mohawk, we were taking pictures of it. It was like an event. There was nobody in town that had a mohawk.
High school bands playing at a party pretty much represented the Little Rock music scene at the time. Man, they're doing Rhiannon. Wow. They're doing Fleetwood Mac. I know that song. Cool. And it was just all cover songs.
There weren't any venues where punk rock bands played or cool bands of any kind. I can't think of barely any venues where bands played at all. But they were considered places where adults went and drank. You had to be over 21. There certainly wasn't an underage place for people to play.
Black Flag played at SOBs, and a lot of people went and just essentially stood around the restaurant to kind of hear Black Flag through the wall, but we couldn't get in. We were all very young.
Even those metal bands that were around that people my age did participate in, they were often had to go play out in a field. It's on someone's farm.
But the kids who were into punk were starting to find each other. Tim Lamb created the first punk fanzine, Lighten Up.
He was the conduit that we were learning about the national scene.
He figured out from reading Maxim Rock and Roll and Flipside, which were magazines from a magical land. I mean, being in Little Rock, that was just, getting a taste of what it's like in a real town. Not like where we're living, where we were these lone rebels.
Lighten Up essentially educated the whole Little Rock scene.
Matt Besser had a zine called Barking at Life.
Since I couldn't make music myself, I didn't seem to have talent in that direction. I wanted to be involved in the scene. I was like, this is how I can be involved. And zines are just like a punk band in that, I can do it, I don't have to go through anybody else to do this. I don't have to sign up or audition. I can just DIY. I can do it myself.
Howdy, folks. This here is Matt Besser, former member of the few punks that existed in the Rock just a mere 2 years ago. Right now I'm gracing the northeastern part of this country with my presence, so I can't share in the forming of this emerging scene.
In 1987, a guy named Robbo conned some money out of the University of Arkansas to open the first punk venue. The annex only lasted a few months, but was home to the first big Little Rock punk band, Iconochrist.
Iconochrist probably came from the same thing that every other punk rock band has come from, for the most part, in this town. Bored, middle-class white kids.
Iconochrist soon moved to California and signed with the San Francisco punk label. Their last shows in Little Rock took place at the DMZ, the first real club, which opened in 1987.
Because after they closed down Main Street, downtown Little Rock was just, it was like a dead zone. So you could have anything. You could have had a club down there where you made snuff films and really nobody would have known.
Had shows with bands like All and Scruffy the Cat and Glass Eye, and we were all of a sudden being included in the underground or the subversive subculture or whatever it was that we thought we were trying to do.
That was our first introduction to you could actually be next to a band when they're playing, like actually be up close. Other shows I'd been to that was like the Monkees reunion tour, at Barton Coliseum. You're so far away.
It was all ages because we never snuck in. I don't know if they had a bar or not, but I know that, I just flat out lied to my parents about what I was doing.
DMZ would change names over the years, from Mandrakes to The Zone, back to DMZ, and finally Vino's. One band would dominate the venue.
I'd have access to the band calendar all the time, so every time a band came through I wanted to play with, I'd be like, Trusty, I'd just write our name in, and that'd be it.
What do you think of Massacre? We're great. They're phenomenal. Yeah, they're your favorite band. They're like, I don't know, I've never seen the Beatles with like small little notes.
Trusty, they were the Little Rock punk band. Iconochrist was on the same level as them, but Iconochrist skipped town, went to the Bay Area, and did their thing. Trusty were the ones who stuck around. We're like, no, Little Rock is where we're from. It's where we want to be. We can build our own thing here.
Those guys became our heroes. Become the guys we followed around and tried to emulate in every way.
They were doing it for Little Rock, and their ambitions were basically to foster a local scene.
We were working in a restaurant together and kind of hatching plots about, you know, our lifestyle, which was punk rock.
I'm not into punk rock. I have never been into punk rock. I was pulled into punk rock. My two best friends in the world started a band. I had a new girlfriend at the time, and I knew the way that things worked in the girlfriend arena is that once you got a girlfriend, all of a sudden your friends were gone, and you started to spend more time with your girlfriend than you did with your friends. So I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll get into this band with these two best friends of mine, and that'll keep me close to them. Punk rock was incidental. We played our first show in March of '89, opening for Metro Waste at the DMZ, and I was scared to death. Actually, I was more embarrassed than scared.
Honest to goodness, that could go down as this show that I remember being just the most thrilling, and having like friends and family come, and I was standing up on stage playing guitar, and it was just sounded loud as that Judas Priest show that I'd seen, you know, 6 years prior. I thought, man, I've really arrived.
You're the guitarist in the band, right?
Yes, I am.
Good job.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Trusty was like this solid, balls-out energy pop punk band. Their shows were just intense, and they were big. When they played DMZ, you had to get there early.
So all these kids started to show up at the show. When I say kids, I mean these kids were 12 or 13, 14-year-old kids.
Seeing Trusty when I was 14, you felt like you were seeing Fugazi.
We were so naive. By our 5th show in Little Rock, we were probably drawing about 350 people. And the guy would be like, you know, he'd give us $100. He'd be like, hey, cool, thanks, man. And so then, like, the next show, he'd like, hey, I want to sweeten the pot. You know, I'll give you guys a couple of pizzas. And we're like, oh, $100 and a couple of pizzas. Yay. I mean, we thought we were ruling.
We knew their names, we had their zines and records and lyrics memorized, and you go like say, hi, and they'd say like, I guess, or wave at us.
The kids that showed up for the Trusty shows were there for Trusty, and they were at the front of the stage, and they knew the lyrics, and they were studying this stuff.
Put 400 people in Vino's. I mean, honestly, do you think every one of them's there like, cheer you, that's too bad, cheer you? No. I mean, a lot of them are there to get laid, or like to see if someone has some weed, or to get drunk, or whatever. You know, you're kind of the soundtrack to their evening, but they chose you as the soundtrack for their evening.
The whole thing was like a way of life. To be in a band, it was so unpunk to have dreams of grandeur.
But Trusty was the dominant band in town. They had put out records, gone on tour, and were opening for every national act that came through. The band started to feel like there were no challenges left in Little Rock. In 1990, they had a fire sale on their merchandise and took off to try and break into the thriving punk scene in the nation's capital.
When Trusty went from Little Rock to DC, we went from being the big fish in a little pond to being, well, as you can guess, no one, not even a fish, not even in the water.
It's not like you move to Washington, you get to be on Discord. It doesn't work that way. But then I thought about it, I was like, first off, super nice guys, good band, they play all the time, like, they do benefits. They've been here for like 4 years playing shows. It's like, I guess that makes sense. Like they're as legitimate as anybody else.
When Trusty moved away to Washington, D.C. and got signed to Discord Records, it was like a feather in the cap, kind of pound on your chest kind of thing, because it's sort of the stuff dreams are made of for kids all across the country and punk rock bands, no matter where you're from.
That was a big turning point too. Like these guys are just knuckleheads just like us. Like these are a bunch of 4 goofballs and they like put out this demo tape, and now they got a 7-inch, dude. Like, wow, they're on vinyl, like they're dorks, we're dorks, like we can do it too, no big deal.
Kids saw that. They saw people who they knew who were no different than them, who lived in their neighborhood, who bought their guitar at the same place they bought their guitar from, or took lessons from the same guy they took lessons from, or whatever. There they were up there doing something that a lot of kids probably never thought they could do, nevertheless see happening, in their town with their friends and their peers and whatnot. And so you get a lot of bands forming around that just from the inspiration.
I was thinking this is like the little high school cover band that I used to be in, except the biggest difference, of course, is that these kids were writing their own stuff. And I wasn't doing that at 14 or 15 or 16 or 18. So we were having an influence on these kids. And at the time I thought, what would their parents think? What kind of influence are we really having? And we're teaching these kids punk rock music. What could be worse than that? When I was 14, I was like into Star Trek. I was worshiping Mr. Spock. They were out at the clubs at the DMZ watching Trusty play and taking a great influence from that. And, there's only so far you can go with an influence of Mr. Spock.
Towncraft and Trusty instilled in us the feeling that we could just do whatever we wanted to do and that we would be successful.
We were way older than a lot of the other bands, which was funny at the time because I think they kind of looked up to us, even though we really didn't know anything more than they did. We were just kind of like, oh yeah, well, when you go to the big city, Memphis.
A couple of them would come to our shows, and it was like Ian MacKaye was in the house. It was like, wow, we have a celebrity at our show, and you made sure to go up and say hi to them, and you were scared to death, and you got on stage and you were nervous. And, it was really important for us that they came to our shows. At the same time, we felt like we had our own scene. Like we felt like we were developing a scene, and it was different from theirs. Even though they were only just a couple of years older than us, we felt like there was a strata, and we were below them, but we were our own thing.
There would be the kind of occasional all ages show that we could all go to and kind of look at each other and see each other outside of school, where you could cut loose, and so that was the scene was kind of building, but the Women's City Club thing put it really over the top.
That was the show where kids that were 14 and 15 came. My mom let me do anything. She wouldn't let me go to the show, and it just made me furious. Got over it, but looking back on it, it's damn, Mom, I missed out on the first real punk rock show.
This was a show that was for the people that were either afraid to go to a club or whose parents wouldn't let them go to a club, but you can go to the Women's City Club and see this music. So suddenly everybody was there.
And it was kind of almost like a show of force, look how many people are here all at the same time.
We were all skating that afternoon, we were gonna go to the show. I was just gonna wear the same thing I was wearing out to skate that day, and Steve brought out his backpack and he had these boots and stuff, or kind of tougher shoes, and he put them on, and I was like, why is he changing shoes? That's really strange. And I was like, is it gonna get really crazy tonight?
You got insurance? I hope you got insurance. This is my lawyer. How you doing? Rockin'.
We got dropped off to play that show by our parents. But so many of our friends from school came to that show, and then we got the older dudes who we idolized to play that show. And that really opened up this whole other world.
A kid who was 14 years old and went to Central High or something, put the whole show together, rented the hall, did the whole thing, brought us in, and got all these people to show up. And I was looking out, there were people slam dancing, and the floors were bowing in, and I was thinking, this whole thing is gonna come down.
To us, we'd never seen anything like it. It just wasn't par for the course. You didn't see these kinds of bands on MTV.
That was a show that I felt brought those kids together, and we felt like we were our own thing. We were a force.
It was just all laid out. It was okay, pick up the guitar, find people who can play with you, you know, maybe, and then try to get a show, you know, once you get the songs together.
The first show we had was the kind of talent show at my high school.
Like I said, we were all skateboarding buddies. And starting a band was the next logical thing to do, because we weren't that good at skateboarding.
I remember very distinctly coming home with my mom from school or something and checking the messages, and it was this woman from DMZ. Hi, this is so-and-so from DMZ. I'm calling to book Hateful Day for so-and-so date. And I almost passed out.
Josh and I were playing with some guys. We kind of knew what we wanted to do one day when we were sitting around. The guys were like, hey man, I want to start playing some stuff like Great White or something, man. All this Prime Threat and stuff, man. I don't know, you know? And so me and Steve kind of look at each other, you know, like, all right, this is okay, another breaking point right here, you know.
In the inside of that first Displaced Aggression tape, it said, Kuehl Brown uses Zildjian cymbals exclusively, and Bert Taggart plays Kramer guitars. You know, it was. I think we were like trying to get sponsorships or something, like we knew how sponsorships work, or like we deserved sponsorships, and you know, and we were playing $100 instruments anyways. You know, it's like it was just a joke. You know, we were just trying to look for something that made us credible. You know, but it was so backwards at that time because I think we were stealing that portion of liner notes from like heavy metal bands, and we were operating in a punk rock world where, you know, it didn't matter what you were playing. It didn't matter what amp you had. I mean, people tore the Marshalls off their amp heads anyway. I mean, but we didn't. But you know, we were just kind of between two worlds, and we didn't understand either. I don't think at that point, you know.
I was the oldest guy in the band. I was 16.
When we won this contest, the Arkansas Musician Showcase, it was such an anomaly as like the fact that we were like these kind of 15, 16-year-old kids that were playing music and playing it pretty decently, and we had these like pretty crazy songs like that. We won this contest over like all these like blues artists and alternative rock artists.
The Numbskulls had a large part to do with from the scene being from the very beginning fairly integrated. They were a multi-culti band, and that was one of the very first bands. So I think they actually a lot more than we did, had a lot to do with setting the tone for here's how this scene is going to be. It's going to be everybody has a place. Everybody has a role. You know, if you don't want to be in a band, do a fanzine. If you don't want to do a fanzine, make t-shirts. If you don't want to make t-shirts, make buttons, you know. Do whatever you want to do, and there's a place for everybody.
On stage, everyone looks like a badass. So, and, you know, I don't think we really could tell the difference between the Numbskulls and the Misfits, or Hateful Day and Fugazi. You didn't realize that there was levels of success or anything. You just knew, man, if you wrote a song, the next step was putting out a record, right? Like, that's just kind of how naive and how powerful that was.
The kids that don't want to necessarily keep up with the Joneses, it's really important in a place like Little Rock, being as small as it is, being in the Bible Belt, being such the kind of town where we always do what we've always done and we always get what we've always got kind of mentality, to be able to do something a little bit different and unique and personal and original. It's so crucial and necessary.
The high school I went to, there's only a handful of people that knew what I did. I knew all these other people that went to different high schools and stuff, and like those are my friends. But the people I was in school with, it was like, I'm like, oh, like there were people might be looking at me going, well, what's that guy up to? But I knew what I was up to, and it had nothing to do with them at all.
It was something that nobody else was doing, or at least in our world. Our world was so small. We weren't, sure we watched MTV or whatever, but we didn't live in a mall and all that shit. All we worried about was playing shows and being with people who wanted to play shows.
Those kids were a wide range. A lot of them were privileged, kind of, you know, wealthier white kids who were also educated. Like they knew, you could tell, they knew music, they knew culture, and they had made a decision they were going to be punk rock. But then there were also kids that were just punk kids, just like totally punk kids. like scary punk kids that came to these shows. And when all those kind of collided, you know, it was really fun.
10th grade rolled around, and we definitely hung out with all the cool kids for a while, and went to all the cool spots, and you know, realized, man, these guys are kind of dicks. They're not nice to girls, and they're not nice to half the guys. And then I got the crap kicked out of me one Halloween night, and realized quickly, like, man, we really shouldn't hang out with these guys. We should gravitate more towards these really strange dudes with shaved heads, and Matt Marcus, who's running away from home, that we have geometry with. Maybe we should hang out with him. Brilliant idea.
We were very ambitious, and you know, we're reading Maximum Rock and Roll front to back every week, and we saw all these bands getting reviews and putting records out that we thought we were equivalent to.
That's kind of where a lot of that organization started, File 13, because they kind of like put a stamp on everything after Trusty.
Jason and I in Hateful Day felt like, well, there's enough bands around, you know, we could make a record label.
Everyone kind of who was working on something or had a demo tape basically just all of a sudden was on File 13.
That was an outlet for Little Rock. It may have been cassette tapes, but it got out there.
File 13 was organized as a collective record label. For 5 years, one kid would manage the label for a while and then pass it on to the next.
So what you still lacked was a record store. I mean, we still had to go to Memphis to get vinyl.
When I realized that, well, everybody is sending off to like get the same records, you know? So I just figured, well, why don't we just buy a dozen of them and we'll have them there. And then that just segued into, well, how much is it going to cost to really rent a tiny spot out where we can just keep these?
Bert had a record store when he was 16. What the hell is that? That's crazy.
I got out of school. I like opened up at 4 o'clock or something. It was only going to be open, I guess I was going to be open for like 4 to 6 or something like that. Pretty limited little window of time to have to go buy your record.
Long Arm changed locations 4 times. None of Bert's landlords were very happy with scores of kids hanging out in the parking lots.
You got out of high school, and that was where you went. School was over, let's go to Long Arm. And that's where the whole kind of community started.
In between the weekends where there was these punk rock shows, there was also a place to go if you had time to kill, you know, and you wanted to get away. So it made it more of a cultural thing and less of a, this is how I spend my Friday night.
It was the genesis of Bert's losing money for rock and roll.
It was walking into a scene for sure, and actually having some sort of context. Because I was eager about learning more. Like every single flyer that was passed along to me, I kind of hoarded and wanted to learn more and wanted to tune into Adios America every week and learn like who the people were.
Steve Schmidt and Sam Kaplan started Adios America, a punk show on the local community radio.
The hours were something like 2 to 5:30 or something like that, and it was just unbelievably horrible hours to do a radio show, but it also kind of freed us up to play just anything we want.
Every evening that we did that show, we'd have 15 people in the studio and another 15 people outside the studio. Everybody would bring up their favorite records or the recordings of their bands.
It was the most educational experience in punk rock that I could possibly have. Having that kind of ammo going into those shows, it felt like I was probably like part of a community, you know, already.
By this point, Hateful Day, Numbskulls, and Step by Step had all broken up. The next generation was dominated by 2 bands.
Before that, Step by Step and the Numbskulls were kind of lesser versions of other bands, if you ask me. Nobody had their direction. And then you had Chino Horde and Substance that were completely original.
People were tagging Chino Horde everywhere, and the cops thought Chino Horde was a gang. And so we're playing this show at Riverfest. Chino Horde is playing to hundreds of kids, and cops are like circling the show.
Chino Horde was just disruptive at the time. Nobody else sounded like Chino Horde. You can't draw on any influences and say Chino Horde was trying to sound like this other band. They ended up defining a sound that went on to influence a lot of other bands. Yeah, maybe there's a little bit of trusting, maybe there's a little bit of Iconoclast in there, and that's a good thing. That's what's kept that common thread throughout the Little Rock bands, and it's helped define a particular sound. But they were disruptive.
I remember just being a little white kid from the South. One of the first DIY shows I saw Substance play, and there was black kids and white kids in the same band. It's just something as simple as that. Made me excited. It was supposed to be fighting racism, but it was in front of me. And at junior high, it still wasn't like that. It was pretty scary, and there was almost there's total race division. And the punk scene, there was at least that's what Substance did. That was their attempt to show people that they can make that bond.
Chino Horde was kind of a band, like we were kind of a force now, but there were 10 other bands. I mean, like the Little Rock scene was a real scene.
You would start a band in your mind and draw it on your notebook, and it didn't even have to ever exist, and you would have 5 different bands, and there'd be, all these different members. You'd make up a band like it was Dungeons and Dragons or something. Strangely enough, that sounds just ridiculously dorky.
There had been a level of bands, they'd broken up, they all started new bands, they broke up, they started new bands, and all of a sudden there was a critical mass of people, and the shows were bigger, and they become much more popular.
Play that guitar, play this show with us, get your band together, let's do this together, get your band together, I'll come and support your shows or whatever you're doing, and and if you need help putting your artwork together, I'll go with you to Kinko's and cut and paste with you, and in 3 months' time, we'll play Vino's again, and your band can open up for us. And it's like, well, good gosh, I can be there, and if I just put in this much amount of effort and try to get my shit together, I can do it.
You go from thinking these guys are rock stars to thinking they're normal guys, then to thinking we're all rock stars because I can do this.
If you're 15 years old in the summer in Arkansas, well, you can go to the lake. If you're into it, maybe you can play junior deputy baseball, American Legion baseball. If you got a car, you can go hang out with your friends. But there's really not that much, for young people to do. So they gravitate together, and all it takes is 1 or 2 of these kids, to have an idea about this stuff and start passing stuff around, records, tapes, mixtapes, all that. And it catches on like that. And you're right, there's not as many distractions here.
I think that what Little Rock has that a lot of cities don't have is total boredom. And that's a great thing for creating something. I mean, if you have a group of kids who are who have a similar aesthetic or a similar philosophy, and they're all bored because there's really not much to do, and there's enough of them, then they're gonna do something.
12 fucking foot fucking set! Suddenly there's instead of 4 or 5 or 6 bands around, there's 24 or 25 bands around.
Everybody was handling their business, We had some really good influences and really good people to look up to, but it seemed like everybody caught on real quick and everybody was handling their business,
Look around when they open their eyes, you're not weaker than you admit. Shit.
DMZ had changed hands, it kept switching. Kids were just like, we're gonna put on our own shows and we're not gonna worry about them. So they became much more guerrilla, more clandestine.
My father's company built an amphitheater in the late 80s for the city to have summer concerts. 50 yards away, the city built a concrete belvedere. The scene soon co-opted both.
We would just kick out a light socket and plug in all our amps and go.
That was the real Little Rock scene. That's when it really took off.
The amphitheater couldn't be seen from the street, and the shows were only advertised on flyers, so the cops generally left the kids alone. The place was so big that an audience of 200 people could stand on stage with the band.
And the only people that were down there were just, the homeless population and us, little punk rockers.
It was basically, the idea that this is free. We're not beholden to anyone. There's no club owner who's going to shut you down and kick your band off stage for being too loud or bad or anything.
This provided a completely different alternative to that was all ours.
It was essential because you had a whole section of kids who were just getting into punk who weren't old enough to go to the clubs or whose parents wouldn't let them go to the clubs. But parents were like, you going to the park? Sure, have fun, Be sure to say hi to, the Miller's son. It was kind of alcohol and drug free. Not that it was straight edge or anything, but it wasn't a scene where it wasn't a bar scene where people were showing up to get drunk or get laid and oh, there's a band playing, awesome. It was really about we're here to see the band and to see our friends. But it was kind of people refocusing on the music and kind of the idea of the community. We're all together in this. We're doing something that's technically illegal, and we could all go to jail, maybe, who knows. But that kind of the clandestine aspect of it, I think, made it tighter.
Well, this is what a scene's all about. People openly communicating, openly supporting new fluxes of people coming in.
My name and number started getting in the hands of other bands from everywhere. From the East Coast, West Coast, Texas, wherever. And so bands started calling, and they knew about these shows at the riverfront that we were doing. So all these bands that really kind of typified the early 90s in terms of punk rock all came through here. And a lot of them played, at this space that we just, stole from the city.
I remember coming to Little Rock and really feeling, there were places we would play where I'd think okay, that's sort of them. And then a place we play where I'd think, it's us. I could tell the energy of the people, whether they just how we connected with them.
Everyone said, all the bands that we've met on the road have said, you gotta play Little Rock. You gotta go check it out. And remember when everybody, there was bands from Oregon and California were coming on tour, passing through Little Rock, and on the way back out west, people just come live in Little Rock for the summer.
A lot of times, that kind of stuff happened because of a college campus around, and that whole college music scene, fueled that. But you didn't have that in Little Rock. It was a high school scene.
92, 93, I was 15, 16, freshman, sophomore in a Catholic high school. And this older generation was just graduating high school. It was a way younger scene than any sort of parallel scene that was happening in San Francisco or DC or New York.
And this is before the Nirvana and all that stuff. So it definitely wasn't punk was becoming accessible or punk was becoming part of the popular culture. It was still very different, So it was the sort of outsiders or outcasts or whatever were.
In their own high school, they kind of were oh, nobody, or they were a kid who got beat up or whatever, but, being able to have a band or have a zine or put on shows gave you somebody to be in this scene that had nothing to do with where, that had nothing to do with your high school.
When we were in high school, we did not have a way to be cool that we felt comfortable with. Where do you get recognition as an adolescent? From team sports? From academic accolades? From fitting in at your parents' societal functions? That wasn't happening. But what we did fit in with was this scene that allowed us to think for ourselves and allowed us to express ourselves. And it just so happens it was on a stage with hundreds of people in front of us.
It's just a small town, and so when you're creative, you can't exclude people. You have to play to everybody. You know, you gotta play to the right. You know, you have to play the redneck. You have to play to the. You have to play to the guys that like hip hop, and at the same time that you have to play to the goth kids, and you have to play to the cool kids. You know, you have to play to everybody.
I don't know. Everyone sort of got together because you only had each other. You didn't have any choice, really. So that was the size. It was just big enough to be really supportive and fun and really like eclectic of mix of people, but it was also small enough that that's all you had. You couldn't go off and sort of like bag on the scene and try to start something else in the rock because there just wasn't possible.
It wasn't so cut and dry. It wasn't like us versus them. It was very much like them and 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 us, whatever we are.
Punk rock then, or whatever it was, we got surrounded by music that we liked. It was maybe something just to piss your parents off initially, became like something you base your ideals on for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And you learned things from those people that were around at that time.
I think there's a sort of a sense of like your friends in high school, like that's your like your like those are the people you'll always like. That'll be the most like important time in people's lives, like the high school, but not for punk rockers. Like punk rock was the most important. Like that, the music created a whole other kind of environment, and it gave us like a situation in which we interacted, and people fell in love, and they were like liberated from like they were liberated from like past shackles, and it was before they got locked into future shackles. You know, it was that moment where you got to like run free, and you had a structure in which to run free.
But it wasn't like punk rock for the sake of attitude. I mean, that was, I think, what was so great to watch, is that it was really the joy of being artistic and having a certain amount of freedom. And in this sort of oppressed southern town, you know, people realized, like, I don't have to be what everyone wants me to be. I can be exactly what I want to be, and there's all these people here that support it.
We were 2.5 hours from Memphis, but we had very little to do with Memphis. We knew there was a music scene there. We knew there was punks there, but we didn't really associate with them. You know, we thought we were special. We thought we were doing something that was like our own thing.
It was living and creating by example. It was taking an idea of a scene or a record label or a zine, and then recreating it in our own way.
If we didn't see something, let's just make it.
Everybody around you did something, you know, and I just think it was sheer momentum. I mean, we didn't have internet and all that shit, you know. It was how you got your ideas across were zines. It was writing songs, you know. It was we'd blog. There was no blog. There was no World Wide Web. There wasn't any of that shit, you know. It's just how we communicate with one another is right here, you know. This is it.
It's almost like each individual person wanted to do this stuff themselves, whether it be music or art or whatever for the scene. I mean, it's like they wanted to do it for themselves and needed just a little something extra, like leaning on their friends. And these other people they're leaning on had the same feeling, but then they turn around and lean on them, and then you get these people together, and these ideas start flowing, and you just, I mean, look what develops.
But Little Rock felt on par with anything else that was going on, with the Discord scene of DC, with the Lookout Gilmore scene of San Francisco. We knew it was happening, I think, but didn't know that it wasn't happening anywhere else the way it was in Little Rock. You know, like it was absolutely unique. It was probably pushing the DIY, you know, ethic further than any scene that had resources, any sort of city that was bigger. And
we had figured out how to put out records. We had figured out how to do shows successfully and for free. The record store was open at that point. So all these things were in place for the first time, and they were all in place at the same time.
Bert Taggart, David Burns, Jason McLeod, Jim Thompson, Mark Dober got together and decided they were going to put out a Little Rock compilation, and it was going to be called Towncraft.
We looked at Little Rock and we're just like, well, there's 10 or 12 songs here. You know, there's 212 bands that can put a song on this compilation and make it good.
Not only did we not know how to do it, but we were also trying to be as inclusive as possible. But like, we had these like big Towncraft meetings that were like, you know, IHOPs and Denny's or whatever, and we would take over a whole section with like 30 kids like trying to hash out, hash out who was going to be on it, what the art, you know, it's like a committee of 30 trying to decide what's on the cover of a record.
It seemed like such a insane idea, like this is going to be such a clusterfuck, like this thing is never going to come out. Like,
we had one song and we didn't have a band, but we had one song, and so we told everybody that the name of our band was 5-0 and we wanted to be on Towncraft, and we were one of the first bands that could pony up the $20 a head a person. So it meant if you had more people, your band paid more, which is kind of an odd way to do things, but pony up.
We should have stayed at two-piece.
We should have stayed at two-piece. That would have been great. Recorded that one song. I think we're the first band to record for the project, and then I went off to camp, and by the time I got back, the whole thing was rolling. I can't believe I went off to camp.
10 bands recorded, and the album would also include a compilation of 10 Little Rock zines.
We started putting on shows, all local bands playing all the time. They were all benefit shows, no one got paid. We would take donations, and people were absolutely diligent. Like if you showed up to the show, you had to pay the $5 or $4 or $2, whatever it was that we were asking. And everyone did it. And if you didn't do it, you were expected to leave. I mean, this was like a scene thing, and we had to make this work.
I'd like to announce that because of tonight, we've raised $500 for the record.
That summer, everybody did benefit shows, bake sales, raffles. In fact, someone stole Bert, in fact, and Catherine McRae and Joy Ritchie, who are students of my mom, called my mom up and asked if they could go through my stuff and find things to sell at this garage sale to benefit the record I was going to be on, which is well and good, except they sold my football helmet, which I still wish I had, and they sold my freestyle bike, which was totally bullshit. I'm sure they sold it for $5. It was a Haro, and it was worth at least $100. So I got home from camp, and while I had this record that was coming out, that was great, I had a garage that had been raped of all memory.
It's a pretty damn good record. But if you listen to it, I mean, it exposes a lot of the tension in the scene also. You know, Mark Lowe's band putting a sample of Steve Schmidt, who was in Chino Horde, kind of making fun of straight edge in a way.
There's basically a conversation happening within that record of one group of kids making fun of another group of kids on the same compilation record.
Yeah.
You know?
And all of them are paying for it.
And we're all paying for it, yeah.
But that was also, I mean, I think that was a very frank way for us to say, well, there's a lot of stuff going on, and we're gonna just document all of it. You know, it's gonna be like crust punks, straight edge kids, emo kids.
That put everything together, and it was all of us in this isolated town, and all of our influences, but we really had nobody else to hang out with. You know, when it all really boiled down to it, we had nobody else but ourselves. So at times we would put all that infighting aside and play a show together.
But this was the first time that any of the bands that my generation was a part of had put out something as solid and significant as this. So it was kind of our coming out party.
Who the fuck is going to take a chance on a little, like you would think who's going to take a chance on a Little Rock compilation LP, but it was spread really far and wide.
The Towncraft era, I mean, that seems like a golden era of Little Rock music. They organized and, you know, raised enough money and did whatever they needed to do to print this just amazing compilation of punk, and then send it out all over the country and get reviewed in big magazines, and, you know, to where, you know, people all over knew Gino Horde and 5-0, and they're these high school kids.
It just, you know, kind of exponentially, you know, multiplied the number of bands and zines and, you know, photographers and artists, everything. I mean, everybody who had been contributing on the periphery, like, they were all the way on the inside, and there was, you know, new people that were being turned on to it, that were realizing that there was some way that they could plug in and be a part of this whole thing.
But what it meant was every band in this town realized they could be on the record. And File 13 got a jump start. File 13 realized that the national audience kind of gave a shit.
By the following summer, the Little Rock scene had reached its apex.
We'd record a demo tape, go to Central High, sell it. I'll never forget Bert coming to lunch, skipping school to come and see his girlfriend, and Shannon and I dutifully gave the money that we had made that day selling demo tapes over to Bert, and Bert proceeds to take a chunk out and hand it to us, and we're like, fuck, like, we just got paid for rocking.
Finally, I started going to those shows. This is what I want to do. These are the people I want to hang out with, who make me not feel so strange, or, you know, or allow me to feel comfortable and not feel threatened or not feel pressured to do anything negative. There is a tremendous amount of pressure, but to do something very positive.
You had to, you know, you had to prove yourself, and still, you know, I still hear guys like, oh, I moved here from Austin, and everybody was real snobby when I moved here, and I'm like, what? This is the coolest town and nicest town in the world, but you're just expecting too much. You're expecting everybody to hug you all of a sudden, man. You need to show and prove, man. I mean, we've been doing this stuff since we were like 12, 13, 14 years old. And we're old farts, man. And I'm not just gonna like, oh, so you play guitar? Come here. Sit on my lap and play me a song, you know? It's like, shit. Get a band together, do something, man. You know, I ain't studying you.
It was almost, you got stigmatized if you didn't have a band and a zine. It was just, everyone was supposed to be contributing to the community, and that's what it was about. If you were just a spectator, you were kind of encouraged to participate or stop hanging around, and that was empowering, I think.
For the first time since the Trusty years, bands started to hit the road and play outside of Little Rock.
Summer rolls around, and Bert buys a van. Bert's bought this van, affectionately known as Old Blue. Chino Horde's going to go on this big month or 6-week-long tour, and they needed a guinea pig, so 5-0 booked a tour. Spent about a week traveling around, and sure enough, we did need a guinea pig because the fuel pump went out in the middle of Mississippi, and we had to wire money. But I mean, it was just this unbelievable experience for a 17-year-old kid to be out on the road, even if it just for a week or 10 days, playing shows. Later on in life, to fast forward a little bit, you realize that did not happen to everybody. And my freshman year in college, I realized no kids did that. They might have had bands, they might have put on shows, but they didn't put out records, and they didn't go on tour at age 17.
When the kids here started connecting with the other people nationwide who were doing the same thing, everything started to get big.
Chino Horde left for tour in July.
13 hours. We've been sitting in this van since 1:30 a.m.
Brought a lot of notoriety to Little Rock. You'd see articles in national punk rock magazines about Little Rock. You know, we'd always had good bands come through. We'd always had Fugazi come through. We'd always had this, but now people were talking about it like it was a sound, like it was a scene. The way that they talked about Eureka, California, or the way they talked about the East Bay.
Everybody said, so, you're from Little Rock. What's Little Rock like? Does it suck or what? And what do you think we said?
It was awesome. It was the greatest thing on earth.
Yeah, what I said is, if you could do the same thing in Little Rock, you could do it in any other town.
When I was in high school, when I was just starting to be in bands, I wanted to be from anywhere but there. I wanted to be from Oakland or from New York or any place cool. But then, but yeah, you get to be 18 or 19 and you realize how good some of these guys and some of these bands that are around actually are, and you start to develop a certain pride in where you're from.
I will never forget hearing 5-0 on the radio in Oregon, of all things, my freshman year, hearing this song, hearing one of our songs come over the radio, and my friends, the dorm room down the hall, and walking in and going, man, you can take my 7 inches and whatnot, just ask me, and it was on college radio. And that made you realize there was some special stuff coming out of Little Rock. Seeing Little Rock patches on girls' backpacks in Oregon, I mean, just kind of blew your mind.
I wasn't even aware of that when it was happening. I meet people now who are like, oh yeah, File 13 Records? Yeah, Chino Horde? Oh, I had all those records, man. William Murder 17? Fuck yeah. And I was like, what? You guys actually knew what was going on? Like, I was like in such a bubble of like, we got our own thing, fuck the rest of the country, everyone thinks they're hot shit, but like, we are like making this for ourselves, and it's way more fun. You know, to me, this seems like way more fun than being in New York and having to deal with like ABC No Rio or something like the established punk scene or CBGBs or what have you. I mean, to me, it was just like, it was, there was so much freedom in it, in the fact that we were small potatoes. And you could use that to your advantage. No one was looking at Little Rock. No one was taking notes. You know, we weren't under scrutiny by anyone but ourselves.
But they were really smart people who knew what they were doing, and they were really in touch with what kind of, with reactions they were provoking. They got it. There were 16, 17, 18, 19-year-olds who were so sophisticated about what they were doing, who saw it as more than just like this juvenile form of self-expression, that saw it as a real, and respected the art form and respected what they were doing.
The palette of music that was being performed changed a little bit into just a wider variety.
Your perfect song.
So the music just spread out from there, like the straight down the middle punk rock sound splintered off, and it became more
Vipers, I think, might have been the best actual band. The Jar, you had caught 2 honeybees, 10 wasps, 5 hornets, and a scorpion and a bat, and they were all shaken up in there.
So most of y'all were in 9th grade to 8th grade?
It's 9th and 10th grade. Me and Eli were in 9th grade.
And 6th for Mark.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, and so our first show was in April of 93, the infamous Arkansas Governor's Mansion show. And Mark was still, I think he was 11 years old.
There's a new governor, and his daughter was having a birthday party, so she wanted to have a show for her birthday. So they put on a punk rock show in the back of the governor's mansion.
The absolute worst in the heart of, what should be so clean.
It was just unreal. It was on the front of the paper the next day. There my band is, on the front of the paper. And I rubbed it in all their faces because it said Graham Cobb and his band, 5-0. It was sweet.
An angry neighbor of the governor wrote the paper and dubbed the punk crowd a generation of vipers.
I can't believe we weren't bigger jerks. Maybe we kind of were, and we definitely felt good about ourselves, but I can't believe we weren't even more elitist, because we thought we ran the world. I mean, we were in rock bands, and on the cover of the paper, and playing in the governor's mansion, and opening up for bands that were our idols. It was just mind-blowing.
We started collecting donations at river shows, and we got $1,000 together and rented Das Utes, 409 Main Street.
Knew lots of bands from across the country, and we decided it'd be fun to have a little clubhouse for everybody to come and have fun.
Das Utes was the first venue actually run by the kids of the scene. They funded it and built it, and for one summer, it was the hub of the Little Rock scene.
So much stuff happened there that summer, and it was amazing, but I do think people kind of got burned out on going to the show every night by August.
Kids were getting burnt out, and the venue was proving hard to maintain.
We would have these young, eager high school kids who would come in every once in a while and help us out for a couple of months maybe, or a couple of weeks, and then they would kind of get bored and move on, and we're like, what's going on? And so what do you know, the next show, down comes a fire marshal to check out what we're doing and see if we're legal, and to check to make sure we have fire exits and fire alarms and all this stuff. We don't have any of that. We have asbestos, flaking off the walls, getting in everyone's lungs.
When the fire marshal shut down Das Utes at the end of the summer, in many ways it marked the end of an era.
There was kind of a different scene coming about because a lot of people my age and older were gone, had left town and gone to college, what have you, or gone to Chicago, New York, Bay Area just to live and kind of move on to the next phase.
A lot of smart people here realize that, they quite rightly feel like that they can't be themselves, they can't be, they can't come into their own, they can't fulfill their ambitions by being here because the world, in general, overlooks us. And, again, I think it always will.
It makes me angry in some respects. There are so many talented people in this town, that always feel they gotta leave, they gotta run away, and because you do. To really make something happen, you usually do. There's no way to make it. If you really are gonna take yourself seriously in music, film, acting, whatnot, you really do have to go somewhere else. There's not enough in this town to really help you excel.
There was still stuff going on. People were still doing shows and stuff, but it was a little bit different than, I guess the shows were the same, but it was kind of either younger people who didn't know so much, and I guess it kind of became more, dare I say, cliquish.
There was this tendency, once the scene had been established as okay, we're the punks. We're the punk rock scene of Little Rock. It didn't stop. It was okay, we're the punks, but we're the street punks, and we're the clean punks. We're the smart punks, and we're the dumb punks. Part of the reason why I left town was I was worried there wasn't a new fresh crop of kids coming in. The old guard were the ones keeping stuff going. Punk music in general became less essential, it became less vital and urgent.
Punk rock and screaming bands and stuff like that became part of the pop culture, and then that sort of killed that pocket band feeling, or the small support group of people that thought like you did.
it seems like there's so many bands and so many things to do that it doesn't seem secret and it doesn't seem special anymore.
But then it became such a huge part of the mainstream that it was like, it had no identity anymore.
The salad days of the punk scene were over. The next decade would see the Little Rock scene reinvent itself, but still on its own terms.
Got out of high school, moved to the Bay Area, and that's, right after Chino Horde broke up, and all this kind of same people were still around hanging out together. And then, like you said, I came back 4 years later, and there was quite a difference. There was definitely, of course everyone was a bit older, not that much older, but it definitely wasn't like this big or very underground unified scene.
It seemed like with everybody else leaving, like I was supposed to leave too or something. It felt like, well, everyone else is traveling or doing something, interesting. I don't want to just stay in Little Rock and keep doing the same thing that I was doing in high school.
Bert moved to Montana to Kalispell and bought a cheap amp and was going to write, understand, this is when Bert talked about the big four rockers in his life as Bruce, Tom Petty, John Mellencamp, Neil Young. And so I think he called them the four great American rockers. And I don't know how Neil Young made that list, but he went to write a great rock record. He came back to town and he decided, I'll never forget, I'm working at Pete's Cafe and Bert shows up in a white t-shirt and he has this silver rope chain on. We're just like, whoa, what's happened to Bert? He's wearing jeans and a white shirt and it has a rope chain. And he's got a sunburnt forehead. He was totally looked the part, of worn out Americana. Handkerchief in his back pocket. He had these songs he wanted to form a band called the Big Cats.
I was getting sick of some of the trappings of what punk rock to me was at that time, and only from a sound kind of thing, not from any sort of ideals or whatever. It was all, I was just becoming more and more into rock and roll.
He would take to musing in front of the lion's cage at the Little Rock Zoo and writing songs called Cat's Call, and with lyrics such as the lion's paw reached past the cage today, and I listened to the cat's call and I heard what he said. And then nobody really understood it. Everybody thought, wow, this is a joke. This is punk rockers doing rock and roll as a joke, or kind of a kitschy thing. But it wasn't. Bert loved it. He loved it. He really believed in rock and really believed in singing and songwriting and craft. It took us a while to get that, but that's when he first started to throw it in our face. It doesn't matter how fast you play these songs. It's not about playing to your audience. It's about playing what you want to play.
By now, the Big Cats were some of the last members of the old punk scene still in town. Another holdover was Sufi Nun Squad.
We had the ethics, we had the DIY. And you saw sort of a burnout with that. The crowd got sick of it. They wanted to dance.
Say we icing on our ass, but that's okay, we're not burning gas, cause we don't ride in cars no more.
The whole sort of notion of Sufi Nun Squad was throwing a party. Almost all shows would have a theme. There would be costumes, to support that theme. Sometimes the theme would be no more complex than the yellow show, and everyone would wear yellow. Genius. And then there'd be other times where it'd be all right, we're gonna have a show where the theme is your favorite breakfast cereal meets your favorite, location on the National Registry of Historical Monuments. Lots of bands talk about this whole ideal of there's no difference between the band and the audience. That's something that we ceaselessly hear in the punk scene. And most of the time, it's bullshit. It's yes, there is a difference. You are the band, and you're on stage, and you're playing a show, and I am in the audience, and I am watching, and I am not playing the instrument. There just is a difference, let's be honest. I think with Sufi, more than perhaps any band in the Little Rock scene, or let's just be honest, rock and roll history, I think we got really good at actually erasing that divide, because if you were at a Sufi show, you actually kind of were in the band, because, shit, you weren't doing anything less than me. I was just singing and dancing. Well, if you knew a lyric and you could dance, then you were doing just as much as I was, so that by that token, you were pretty much in the band.
I've seen them here where there's a room full of people that aren't getting it at all. But then they're going to play a song called the Cinder Block where everybody has to stop and do a cinder block, and everyone's doing it. And you're just like, it takes you totally out of your element.
Stop, stop, just stop. Everybody stop and do that cinder block. Now stop, stop, just stop. Everybody stop and do that cinder block. Now stop.
Uh-oh, Grandma?
They totally rip away any pretense and like, no, you're not cool because we're not cool and you're here to see us, you know.
It's certainly a factoid that's tossed around that may or may not be true, that like Sleeping Down Squad has toured more than any Little Rock band ever. There's so many tours that I don't even necessarily go on them anymore. I'm like, I'll see you guys when you get back.
We broke up in 1995 when Mike and Dustin went to college.
Yeah, we were freaking out. We're like, obviously we can't.
And then you realize it's a small country, and you know, on summers and Christmas breaks we were here, and then after college people started to move to different cities, whether it was Philadelphia, New York, or Providence, and now people are in the Bay Area. And so we just did it.
What we thought was our demise ended up being the catalyst for touring to all these places.
Yeah.
So once each person in the band moved out and away from Arkansas, you had this whole new circle of friends, and you started finding anything that resembled the scene you saw in Little Rock, and then you bring your band. When summertime comes, we'd come back home, and then we'd take Sleeping Down Squad on tour and go to all these different cities where we were living during the year.
I think it gives you a glimpse of an alternative way of living that's, outside the, middle class model. It's outside the bourgeois capitalistic, sort of thing. It was nice to see that there are actually people who have courage of their convictions that would go out and live that way for a while.
As our friends who had moved away and gone to college had graduated and had started settling into their first career or whatever, and we're still these rock and rollers in Little Rock, I think we felt like, well, the band has to make a real shot at it. We have to really play our cards the best that we possibly can and go for it. That wasn't happening in Little Rock.
In 1996, the Big Cats headed out on tour. Their hidden agenda was to find a new city to live in. Eventually, they decided on Chicago and came back to Little Rock with an apartment lease in hand.
It's not like we left for that tour and said, okay, we're moving somewhere or we're coming back here and breaking up. There wasn't that sort of ultimatum, but I remember, there was this really deflated kind of feeling when we couldn't, the four of us, agree on that.
The Big Cats soon split up, and several members left Little Rock. The few remaining members of the old punk scene started to integrate themselves into other bands in town. These bands played a wide variety of styles and had larger ambitions than the old punk scenesters.
Everybody loosened up a little bit over that 4 years I was gone, I suppose, and sort of embraced everything about Little Rock instead of just this little incestuous scene.
We had a bit of a college following, and there was an underground punk scene in Little Rock that we didn't know about because we didn't know what that world was. We were from the sticks. We ended up signing a record deal and made an extremely mediocre record that was mainly just because we were out of our element, and it was kind of nerve-wracking and someone else's project, not ours as much.
They'd been to the top of the mountain. They were signed by Universal, They sort of went to uncharted territory. They came back. They told from the mountaintop and told everybody about what it's like, and it sucks, to be with a really fucking big major label. They're gonna eat you alive, and they're gonna take what is best about you, and they're gonna exploit it and abuse you. And then when it doesn't work, they're gonna blame it on you, and they're gonna fucking throw you aside.
The Boondogs were flirting with success too. They won a national contest with GarageBand.com. The company spent over $250,000 recording their album.
We got the full-on major label, big dollar treatment to these singles. The engineer told Indy she needed to sing more like Sheryl Crow. It was just everything that you hear happened.
We had our own ideas of what we wanted to be, and we weren't willing to play the game, so I think in that sense it was a really good experience in that we got to figure out what we wanted to do and who we wanted to be.
I could have done other things, like be an investment banker or put the suit on and do whatever, and I just couldn't bring myself to do that. But then when I found out that we were also expected to do that as a rock band, that's when I said enough's enough.
We were all treated the same way in the machinery and all came away from it deciding, no thanks.
It made me realize that I was cursed with that feeling I had to make music no matter what I was doing. Even if we were on Universal, we were not. We were putting it out on cassettes ourselves.
They're the only band ever, I will challenge anybody, that got dropped from a major label that has put out an album for 8 years straight, every year, man, on their own dime. That is better than the album they put out on a major label.
One night we had this really bad show in Kansas City, nobody was there. So Rod's like, man, fuck this town, I got something for them. And he reaches in his pants while we're driving back to the hotel and rips his boxers off and like throws them out the window. And right as he ripped them off, I noticed they were mine. He was wearing my underwear.
Kevin Kirby left Ho Hum to start a band called Mulehead.
He's a ornery, bearded, little sawed-off guy who's very funny, who's very Arkansas. There's a great song called Copperheads and Cottonmouths, which is the best song about snakes ever written. And he has another song, Pontius Pilate, which is probably the only rock and roll song about Pontius Pilate ever, and it's the best.
Mike Cusinelli moved to Little Rock in 1999 and put out 2 Mulehead albums.
To my mind, it was just amazing to see, just this long list of bands who were just fully formed and at any minute could break through and go somewhere if they were so inclined to, and they were ready they could play a show and open for anybody at any time in any city in America or in Europe or whatever, and it didn't make a difference because they just encapsulated scene. And to me as an outsider, and when I would tell my friends or other industry people about it, I say, this is like Seattle. This is, in the early 90s, or this is like Minneapolis in the 80s, on maybe a smaller scale and not getting the attention, but, who knows? This is the kind of place it could blow up.
Mike went on to manage Go Fast, a band that straddled the punk southern rock divide.
Sing about, self-empowerment and your dreams can come true if you work hard enough, blah, blah, blah. But, in kind of a switchblade, outlaw kind of way.
Now we do like shots and titties and shots. And how you good-looking motherfuckers feeling tonight? Let me hear some noise.
There were other bands that were tough, but they stood out because the Sheeter, Jack Daniels drinking on stage, sleeveless denim jacket, like.
Had this town never seen that?
Not in the same vein.
We go do the showcase, and me and Matt are shooting heroin in the Chelsea Hotel just because Sid killed Nancy there. We're like, oh, these stupid kids doing stupid shit. And I hung out. What was funny is they tried to pit me out to a Michael Largo, which signed White Zombie and Metallica, because he was at the showcase and he was queer. He was just wanting me. He's like, woo, Arkansas chicken. And that was my New York experience. And then
it's nuts, man. He is so crazy and so driven that it got me to be driven, for 8 years of my life.
It's always gotten more and more busy every day. That's why Matt and them quit, because it's getting busy. I mean, I work your dick off. I mean, I'll do a show and want to do another show. Load and go and drive the truck and do all the, signing and whatever the hell we got to do. And then whoop your ass if you got a problem with it.
During the life of the band, the band's aspirations were pretty large, right? I mean,
they were large, but they weren't real smart.
Yeah, Floyd is like, why don't you get on MySpace.com? I said, then I'd be like all you motherfuckers. I want to be a mystery. I want to be that Bigfoot legendary motherfucker you only see every once in a while.
The scene in Little Rock, although it was totally different than this punk rock thing that happened at the river or whatever, was still totally cool and totally inventive, and nothing seemed to be sacrificed in that transition, that thing from punk to pop songwriting.
By 2000, members of the old punk scene started filtering back into town. Shannon Yarborough, the guitarist for 5-0 and the Big Cats, had been living in New York for a few years.
He's a bellman at the Mercer in Manhattan, and he's seeing George Harrison, and he's seeing, Share to Think, and all these kind of big time folks, DiCaprio and all this shit, and I think he just realized fast that he didn't need all that to be playing music. He could put his studio in his grandma's house and go and do that in Little Rock, Arkansas.
One Sunday afternoon, I get a phone call from Josh, and he tells me that Shannon had died.
In May, Shannon was driving to his grandma's house and hit a tractor that someone had pulled in the middle of the road, and it killed him. That was the kick in the ass, I guess, that everybody needed. I've always said it was the worst thing and the best thing that ever happened to me because he'd been my best friend for 12 years and had always helped me day to day, but he just kind of helped me in one giant moment for probably the rest of my life.
Obviously, with Shannon's passing, the Big Cats were basically not talked about. Just complete flux. But once we started coming back to it and keeping in better touch, that was one of the first normal conversations that we had again was, what do we do with this band, do we do anything?
After Shannon died, we kind of wanted to keep it going for no other reason than to just sort of have a reason to remember him and keep him around.
It was one of those things where we'd spent our entire early 20s romanticizing life, and the one guy who lived it most was gone, and we had two choices. We could quit doing anything passionate and dry up, or we could just go ahead and keep going, and Bert kept going. I remember sitting on his porch in Fayetteville and him talking about how he was going to put out a Big Cat 7-inch, and he didn't know what to call it, but he wanted to have something to do with Shannon, and his middle name's Max, so it became Max Recordings.
It was this 45 label, so all you're looking for is 2 songs, It's just, give me 2 good ideas, and let's make the most of that.
One of the first Max records was Il Libertina, a band started by Paul Bowling of Trusty, who'd been living in Chicago for 6 years.
Il Libertina was kind of bloomed out of necessity for all of us to kind of exercise our recent demons. And Shannon had just died, my father had just died, and Marcus had just come back from Atlanta where he had not had a very pleasant time, and we were all feeling pretty low. And Il Libertina was our way to kind of get together and tell each other, just by playing kind of loud at each other, that we still had viability and that we were still alive, and that there was still something out there that we could do.
Very good. We tore ass. Il Libertina tore ass.
It was great to be able to offset everything that I was supposed to do as a father, as a provider, as an engineer, as a husband, as a churchgoer, as a vestry member, as all these things, all these other little hats I wore. I also got this little secret one back here that I get to put on. I get to stand in front of you and rock all day as long as I want, and feel proud about it.
There's several bands now that are in Little Rock that are, consist of people around my age, which is 30, and they've all kind of stumbled into or found how music and the creative process of putting together album art and all these things that, really you do, on, notebooks sitting in high school classes, how you can still do those things at 30 and be completely satisfied by the process.
When I was 17 or 18, hell, I saw myself, I don't know, not being a rock star, but being a punk rock star. Being like in a van and like a bunch of people knew me, still wearing cutoff shorts.
When you start to get a little older and you start looking at your life and you start seeing that, you're not going to be a fucking rock star or whatever, but then you really don't even care when you start getting older.
you start seeing better things. You start, developing friendships or relationships or whatever, realizing that all that really matters is your family and your friends.
And when I was in Memphis, my expectations were to get signed and be somebody, And I came back here and I was somebody with my friends in this neighborhood. And that's basically all I needed.
As far as this huge musical community that I've been a part of, and 14 years on or whatever, most people didn't ever go for the golden rung.
If you are a writer or an artist or anything, the reason you're doing it is not because, ultimately, at the end of the day, it's not because you think you're going to get paid for it. If that's your motivation, well, you're probably not very good. You're probably a mediocre artist, and you probably need to stop.
People think that somehow, maybe I'll be I'll be a web designer, either a web designer or a lawyer or a musician, as if it's a career like it's something you select to do. But I think of musicians, for me, it's like you don't have a choice in the matter. You do it because you have to do it.
You can also mix that sentiment with a really natural sentiment that I think happens as you get older, you're still plugged into music stuff, and realize how the world works, and you realize that you really can't go after it too much anyways. I mean, you can play a lot of shows and you can travel, but I think outside of that, I think that's really about all you can do, unless you're lame.
Mulehead, Kevin Kirby, should be humongous, but he's got 2 kids, his family. That's the way, Libertina should have hit the road. There's something real magical about this town, but at the same time, not. Because people kind of get stuck here. But maybe that's just my jaded opinion. Maybe that's why it's so magical. Maybe it's just for us.
Max has worked with bands that are, trying and doing it and going for it and touring a whole lot. And then there's, old dudes like us that just kind of go, I just want to stay here.
I think it's just we're playing music on our own terms, or under our own. There are the conditions that we.
If it pleases us.
My son is more important than the music, I guess, right now. And as far as the music, for me, it's kind of like I want to leave a legacy for him, so he can kind of look back one day and say, but those are my parents, and they did something really cool, but not at his expense.
Like I said, everybody getting older and having kids and being married, that's when it becomes, well, hey, I'm just doing this for my friends. But not really. Everybody's doing it because that's just what you do. It comes naturally to you. But there's no doubt in my mind that any of them, if you dangle a little something in front of them, like they're gonna take off. They'll go for it. They'll bite it. Any of us would.
In 2006, Kevin Kirby put out his first solo record with Max.
For however long it takes me to write a record, I'm thinking one way, or I've discovered something new and that kind of triggers something, so I write a bunch of songs. So I want to document those songs, put them on a record, make the artwork reflect the way I was thinking, just to be able to say, here, this is what I did this year. This whole attitude of not wanting to tour and only wanting to document, and only making records for yourself and having no motive, that's also a defense mechanism, because if somebody came to me and said, I'll give you $1 billion to go on tour, or 100,000, whatever the hell they pay, I would do it. I would totally do it. But because they're not knocking on the door, it's easier to say, I don't want to. It's good that I actually do feel that way, and I can say it because I don't have to prove that, I wouldn't do it. Because nobody's going to come knock on my door and offer me $100,000. But if you do, I'll do it.
If I go see Kevin Kirby play, that's a guy on a porch, and he's singing and writing from the heart, and he's writing from right here. You know, I mean, he's writing for all of us. He's singing for everybody. So a lot of the times, the people that you find in the crowds at shows here are people in bands. We play to each other now. And I don't quite know what that means, except that whenever you go to a show, you're always going to find your friends there.
Sit on my lap for a second. I want to ask you something.
I will stand.
Okay. What kind of guitar does Bruce Springsteen play?
A Telecaster.
Telecaster.
That was funny.
Wait. Okay. What kind of guitar does little Steven play?
Stratocaster.
Stratocaster.
None of it, nothing that has come out of this town has made it. Nothing. American Princes are the only band right now that really stand a chance to maybe do something.
In 2001, Arkansas native David Slade was moving his band from New York to Little Rock.
We drove in at night, and the next morning I wake up in Scott, Arkansas, and I look out the room I was sleeping in, and instead of looking out at a warehouse, it was this sod farm, and the sun was coming down on me, and I was like, you know what? This is if you're gonna make a change that drastic, then moving from Brooklyn, New York to Scott, Arkansas is definitely, the change.
The Prince's record, We Are the People, was the first full-length album on Max Recordings. Bert served as their pseudo-manager and booked the band's first tour.
Words cannot describe how long it seemed like we were on tour, by the way. Like, that was when Matt and I got mistaken for homeless people.
By homeless people.
Yeah, it's true. This guy with all these bags and all this dirt over his face, kind of gives me and Matt a $2 Wendy's gift certificate apiece, and he says, man, it's not much, but it's enough to make a turd. And that's when I knew that this was the job for me.
In 2005, after 2 albums with Max, the Princes signed to Yep Rock Records, one of the biggest indie labels in the country.
We're a Little Rock band, and this is where we are. I mean, it's not really something that I lose too much sleep over, wondering what it would be like somewhere else, because I like it here. I love it here. I would rather be here than anywhere else.
We want to throw something down that's re-recorded for Max Recordings for Bert. So this next song's on that record.
But when Yep Rock bought them, I guess, and bought Little Spaces, the American Princess gave us that money so we could keep going. And that's just, that sums up what Little Rock music is and what Max Recordings is about. You're just doing everything to help each other. Bert can't do this on his own. The bands can't do it on their own. So that's what that's what has to happen. That's what's happened with every single project we've done.
Your poor little life gets covered in flames, and it turns on.
And so, I know that sounds weird to be such a homer that you sit around listening to demos or, home-produced albums by bands in your own hometown. But I think that speaks to the quality of, the bands here. They're really viable bands that can have completely changed my life.
But it's gone in a second and it's worthless, so what's so wrong?
Max Recordings was a perfect example of the DIY that came out of Little Rock, because it's a good perfect example of, well, why not? Why can't I do that? It's like saying, why can't I climb Mount Everest? All I need is the boots.
There's music to document that's not being documented, and that I feel is as vital as anything that I was doing or had a hand in doing when I was 18. There was 8 years where that didn't happen in my life, and you wrote songs and no one ever heard them, or you tried to play shows in New York, but it was too damn hard. But in Little Rock, I've always been able to express myself, and I feel like I know how to do it effectively, more so now than ever. And so that's that's what the label's about, is finding where music fits into your life now.
Bert has definitely gone from writing these songs about how he wants life to be to writing songs about how life is. The song Man of Leisure, it just almost wrecked me last summer when he wrote it, because it's just brutally honest. And we used to always tease Bert about biting his fingernails, and he references that. We used to tease Bert about putting too much salt on his food, and he references that and says I wanted more salt and needed more pepper, you know. And there's a line, I can still be a banshee, but more and more I don't want to be. And that's kind of how we all are. I mean, we're 30, and we used to fight growing up, and now we're trying to mold growing up, I guess, into being what we want it to be.
I can still be a banshee, but more and more I don't wanna be. I don't wanna be. I don't wanna be.
We'll probably keep playing, I can see, for the rest of our lives, you know, as long as time will allow and everybody's available. I think we'll probably do it every year, at least once a year. But I don't think we're gonna, like, everybody's gonna quit their day jobs and we're gonna go on tour anytime soon or anything like that.
Right now we just hang our hats on the fact that when Jason plays with Green Day, he might wear a Big Cat shirt or a Max pin. I'll never forget that when he played the Grammys, having him walk out there with that Max pin on his lapel, where he's like, yeah! It's pretty, you know, that's the stuff that makes you feel 17 all over again, so it's pretty cool.
It took the Big Cats 8 years to release one record that ended up just being a compilation of previous songs that were strewn about. And it's taken us, you know, the next 4 years to come out with another record. And I've never been more proud of the record that we have just finished. And at the same time, I'm at a place in my life where I've got this absolute shiny piece of, you know, something that all of me is wrapped up inside of, and I want to show it to everybody, and I want everybody to dig it. And at the same time, I'm totally not willing to hop in a van and go travel to make that happen, you know? I mean, because, you know, I know that, you know, I can put it out on my own label and it'll look amazing, and you know, there's not a label anywhere else that can, as far as CD for CD, will make it, can give me anything, you know, better than what I'm going to put out. You know, will it land in as many people's CD racks or on as many people's computers or whatever? No, but I'm still not going to get in the van.
The old Little Rock scene is now spread across the country. Some of them do make their living touring the world playing music. But all of them carry their experience in the scene with them.
Some of them turned it into playing music, some of them turned it into making zines, some of them turned it into photography, some of them, you know, there's artists, all that came out of that one group in the very beginning.
And it was seeing kids in Little Rock playing music. That was when I realized, wait, kids can play music. I can play music. And here I am now.
I started a record label when I was 17. So at 33 now, I should be able to be a college professor, right?
The whole atmosphere here in Little Rock has bred in me the impulse to try anything new that I want. That is luck. I think it's lucky.
The kind of greatest gift that we gave to the community was there's that avenue to explore a different sort of culture in this city that you might not have known about, and it was a positive culture. It was going to be something that's going to enrich your life.
I can do what I want. And if you don't like it, well, I'm just this boy from Little Rock.
In the Delta, in the hammocks, well, she was tired but never stranded. It's a place you call home, not the picture you imagine while you're wishing for a camera in a place you call home. She's not lost, she's not lost, she's not lost. She's not lost, she's not lost, she's not lost. Not here, but not forgotten, and still so well spoken in a place by her home. And when it seemed quite certain, she threw aside the curtain and headed for a place you call home. She's not lost, she's not lost, she's not lost. She's not lost, she's not lost, she's not lost. She's not lost, she's not lost, she's not lost. Some things you can't imagine, but you just go on.